Let's really listen to this quote.
And I quote, "With the incense of burning cedar and the singing of sacred songs, I came into the world. I was singing too, although they probably thought I was wailing." Today we're talking about Dr. Joe Medicine Crow, the last man to perform all 4 tasks to earn himself the title of war chief, and he managed to do it all during World War II. Born on October 27, 1913, Joe was raised on the Crow Indian Reservation in Montana under the watchful eye of his grandfather, the original Chief Medicine Crow, who was considered to be one of the greatest Crow war chiefs of all time, and he would raise Joe to follow in his footsteps. As a child, he was taught how to hunt, fish, track, ride a horse with no saddle, and to make him tough, his grandfather would make him run outside in the snow barefoot and bathe in frozen rivers. All of which were skills and traits that Joe would need to even stand.
Sounds like Dagestan, man. You know what I'm saying? Send him to Dagestan for 2 years.
Yeah, we turned into something else in this country.
Ain't
That
that cool?
rhymes with Dagestan, but I'm not going to say it.
It definitely
Fill in the
rhymes
blanks.
with Dagestan.
Nah, I mean, it's funny because, like,
Yo, that could be a cartoon. But we get banned. You can't even say that word on the internet anymore.
oh my God.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I'm kind of wondering
Toxic.
what these challenges are, because I know that, like, I think certain tribes, like, one of the challenges to be considered like a warrior was to go up to an enemy and touch them without striking them, which is kind of a hard, like, if you think about it, a dude's like trying to murk you and you're like, bink, haha, and then just bounce.
Reminds me of kids' jujitsu class when I'm helping coach the kids. We're doing a face your opponent, and all you do is like touch the toe to kind of get them open for, like, you know, takedowns.
Yeah.
But it's like that
Yeah, we'll do
concept
the
would
same
be
type of
bananas
games.
with some dude with a damn axe, and you're just like, bink. Anyways, all right,
club.
let's get back to it, man. I just
And a chance at becoming a war chief like his father and his grandfather. You see, to become a Crow war chief, you had to complete 4 tasks. You had to lead a successful war party where neither you or any of the men you were leading got hurt. You had to disarm an enemy in combat. You had to steal an enemy's horse. And finally, you had to perform a counting coup. Most people describe a counting coup as touching the enemy without actually having to kill them. I don't know if that's the PG-rated version or if they're just underselling it, because it's way more badass than that. One of the ways that you can do this is to run up and touch the enemy with your hands, your bow, or your coup stick and escape unharmed. And this is seen as an extreme act of bravery, because rather than shooting at the enemy from far away with a bow or a gun, it takes a real badass to roll up on somebody that wants to kill you, get within arm's reach and go boop, and then get away completely unharmed. Like, you're just letting the enemy know, by the way, you're completely outclassed and you should probably reconsider what you're about to do next.
They out there teabagging their enemies. It's like nuts on the forehead.
yo, there.
The other way you can perform a counting coup is to force the enemy to surrender without actually having to kill them. It's the equivalent of making your enemy say uncle or tapping them out. And here's the kicker with the whole thing. This criteria was deemed incredibly hard to achieve back in the day when it was invented hundreds of years ago. And it was only accounting for Native American tribes going up against other Native American tribes, or like dudes with muskets. It definitely was not criteria that was created with the foresight to account for the battlefield changing to incorporate machine guns and tanks, let alone the fact that horses aren't even the main mode of transportation at this point in time. It's going to be hard enough to find a horse on the battlefield, let alone strategically transfer it to an alternate location. But that's what Joe Medicine Crow has to do if he wants to become a war chief. But again, all that's just assuming that there is a war for Joe to even fight in, because it's only 1929, he just graduated 8th grade, and he's about to go off to college to achieve his associate's degree, which he does. And then he goes on to achieve his bachelor's degree. And then he goes on to become the first Crow Native American from his tribe to achieve a master's degree. He then begins working on his doctorate degree, but that gets stopped in its tracks because 1941, Pearl Harbor happens, America enters World War II, and life in America, as everybody knows it, gets flipped upside down. In the days immediately following Pearl Harbor, hundreds of thousands of Americans would volunteer to join the U.S. military. But Joe Medicine Crow was not one of them, because at the time he was 28 years old, and in 1941, at 28 on the dot, you were deemed too old to serve in the U.S. military. So, unable to fight and unable to finish his doctorate, he would take a job as a teacher in
pause
a
real
Native
quick.
American boarding.
What I want to highlight about this as we go into this story is for people to keep their eye on the prize. We could look at America in multiple factions, and these type of stories, in my opinion, are very inspirational. I feel like they're really left out of the American psyche and social commentary in right now in 2025. Now, there is a sect of the internet and people who gravitate to this type of stuff, but I'm saying in popular culture, these conversations are very important to be had on the type of opportunities, the type of things that are achieved by all different Americans, and they reach these heights, right? Like him graduating and all these things. And I didn't know that group Redbone was actually just Native Americans that in a band, and they reached really big heights, you know, with some of their songs. And not to get like, because America is going through the demoralization phase, and when I hear stuff like this, I'm like, you know, when I was leaning super left, where were these stories to help invigorate and understand the balance of America and the good sides of it, and the great things and the inspirational things? And I
mean, that's kind of one of the crazy things about the military, is that it brings people from all different cultures together to serve under the nation. And you hear these stories, like, you know, the thing that comes to mind for me is just like how deep the warrior culture runs in men,
yeah,
you know? And so it's like, there is this,
I think we're put on the earth to fight for something, like whether it's our loved ones or whatever, but we are put here to fight.
Yes. I mean, as men, there's that strong, you know, it's dissipating, but there is that urge, right? And so that's where, you know, it can be channeled into negative things. Like I was listening to Soft White Underbelly, and it was this guy talking about being in the Mexican mafia and how he wanted to join the military. He wanted to go fight in Vietnam, but he got in trouble with the law, couldn't go to Vietnam. So he was like, I'm going to be a warrior for my gang. Yeah. And it just makes me think about how many young men fall through the cracks because they don't have a positive channel. But to your point, I mean, that is, you know, I was always anti-military just because of the way that I was raised, my father, but you have all these different stories of like Mexican Americans, you know, Indians, blacks that go in, and it's like in that environment, you are looked at as a warrior, right? And you're honored as a warrior no matter what. Yeah. Like the sole thing is like, do you have courage? Do you have bravery? Are you willing to, you know, fight and die for your brothers around you? And there is something that's beautiful about that.
And one thing I was also trying to highlight is just that America has a system. And if you take part in that system, there are great things that can come from that. And I feel like a lot of people sit on the sidelines and just complain and take a victim mindset instead of taking part, taking action and movement. And this is just a really good highlight of, you know, making that move, you know, and really, I don't know, we're only at the beginning. So let's just go. I just, you know, the fact that, you know, they're giving all these accolades, it's a lot of times shunned from, you know, let's say native, indigenous people, black folks, whatever. Like, I just see it in my culture.
Yeah, why would you fight and die for Uncle Sam?
And I just see people don't look at it the right way, and I just wanted to take a moment to highlight it because it's super dope. And anybody of any race in America, if you take part in the system, you can have access to opportunities unlike, you know, many parts of the world.
School in Salem, Oregon for a short period of time. He would pretty much immediately quit that job and go to work in the shipyards in Washington to at least help the war effort in any way that he could. And he worked his ass off in that shipping yard for a year until November of 1942, when the United States government would strike down the age restriction on joining the military, and Joe was officially able to join if he wanted to. Which is exactly what he does, because he's got to go over there and end this shit so he can go back to school and earn his doctorate degree. So fast forward March 1943, Joe's been through training, and he is now all the way over in France on the Siegfried Line. If you don't know, the Siegfried Line was Germany's last line of defense before being able to actually enter Germany. It was essentially their entire western border that had been fortified to resist invasion. The entire thing was covered with giant concrete spikes known as dragon teeth that made it impossible for tanks or any other type of vehicle to get past them. And then in front of those spikes were mines, and in front of that was barbed wire. And on the other side was German machine gun nests, mortars, and artillery ready to slaughter any foot soldier that tried to make it through. And Allied forces have been halted here in their tracks since August of 1942, but then in March of 1943, this new guy shows up. He's already got a reputation for being a badass. He's rocking Native American war paint underneath his fatigues, and he's got a yellow painted eagle feather underneath his helmet for protection. Surely this man is the main character. We're gonna see what he can do. So Joe's commanding officer pulls him aside and says, hey, look, if anybody can pull this off, it's going to be you. But I need you to take a small group of guys and a bunch of explosives, make your way through the Siegfried line, find a German machine gun nest, and completely demolish it. That way we can get some construction guys in there. They can take out the barbed wire and the mines and the dragon's teeth without getting shot at the entire time, and we can start funneling forces in and finally break through this line. So on March 15th, 1943, Joe Medicine Crow would lead 7 other men through the barbed wire, through the mines, through the dragon's teeth, all while being fired at by German machine gun fire and mortars exploding all around him, and they would make their way to the machine gun nests and begin blowing up as many of them as they could. Because of this, Allied forces are finally able to break through the Siegfried line. Joe Medicine Crow is believed to be the first American to set foot into Nazi Germany, and all of the men that he led into this raid were completely unharmed, meaning that Joe Medicine Crow had just successfully led his first war party, and that he had completed the first task in his journey to becoming the last war chief.
Bro, I'm getting goosebumps.
Fast forward.
Yeah, I don't want to pause it too much, but you know, it is interesting that we do tend to forget the sacrifices that were made by previous generations, especially now where they're tearing down statues and saying, oh, these, you know, evil white men that built this country, and all these, you know, statements that are going around. And you know, it's easy to look in retrospect about the things in that time period that we look at and say, oh, that's awful. And we can fast forward and people are going to look at our time and be like, how could they have done that? They're so stupid, so ignorant, so bigoted, all these different things, right? But you think about those men that fought and died to try and preserve the values that we uphold as a society now. And then the craziest thing is that they had to come home and then be family men and be fathers and grandfathers and teachers and, you know, mechanics and all those different things that push society forward. And then we look at that and say like, oh, those men were so horrible. They had their feelings bottled up. They were, you know, potentially, you know, abusive, or, you know, all these different things. But like, there were no conversations about mental health back then. There was no like, hey, you got PTSD, you know, you need to talk to a therapist. It was like, here's a whiskey, shut the F up and get back to work.
Yeah.
That's the truth of it, you know. And like, how could you, I mean, look at, like, there's way more veterans, right, that have, you know, chosen to end their lives after the war than died in the war. Right. So we know what that toll is that these men, you know, experience having gone through that. And these men came back and had none of the support system that is available today, and none of the recognition of what that trauma is like.
What's funny is what you said. I think it's going to flip flop in the sense that, you know, we look back right now and look back, oh, that was horrible, they did this. But our future is going to look back and say we were dumb for being so soft and being. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
For not being like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's going to flip.
Yeah.
And there's just a happy medium. Perfection's in the middle. It's the balance. But that's how I see it's going to play out.
Yeah, I can see that.
For a couple months, Joe's entire unit's clearing out a small German town, and they're in the middle of a huge firefight. So Joe decides he's going to cut down an alley so that he can go and get around to flank the enemy. As he's running down the alley, he gets far enough down that he thinks he should be able to turn in and get to where he can find a good position to launch an attack. And that's when he turns into this narrow gate into somebody's backyard, and right as he turns into the gate, he collides helmet to helmet with a German soldier. It is now just Joe, this German soldier, and the firefight in the background. So Joe leaps forward, grabs the German's gun, throws it to the ground, raises his gun at the German, ready to fire. The German's standing there completely helpless, and for some reason, Joe's not quite sure why, he decides that he's going to throw his gun on the ground too, and they're going to, and I quote, tear into one another. So they start having a good old-fashioned fist fight, and this German ends up getting the better of Joe. He ends up wrestling him to the ground and getting on top of him and hitting him. And finally, Joe would manage to roll him over, get on top, hit him a couple times in return, and then he would begin strangling him. This guy's entire head is turning different shades of red and purple and blue as Joe is quite literally strangling the life out of him. And in one last fit of desperation, he manages to buck Joe off just enough to be able to gasp out, "Mama, Mama." And for some reason, Joe said that this opened his ears and he decided to let the man go. So Joe hops up, grabs his rifle, and carries on to go flank the enemy like he had originally intended to. And at this point, he didn't even realize that he had just completed 2 more tasks to become a war chief. He had disarmed his enemy, and he had committed a counting coup by forcing his enemy to admit defeat without killing him. Which means the only thing Joe has left to do to become a war chief is to find a horse and then steal it. I mean, strategically transfer that piece of equipment to an alternate location. I don't know what you're thinking. Good luck. You're not going to find a horse in the middle of World War II. This is the era of cars and tanks and machine guns. But honestly, you'd be wrong, because the German military in World War II actually used horses a lot. So much so that the German military was actually blown away that when America showed up, they didn't have horses at all. They exclusively had motorized vehicles. And this was actually an early indicator to high up Nazi leadership that they were about to get their schnitzel kicked in. Because this highlighted the enormous gap in logistical power between Germany and America. America was creating enough motorized vehicles and refining enough oil, and then had the power to ship it all the way across the planet to provide for their entire military, and Germany couldn't pull that off inside of Germany, let alone across the world. Sorry, we're getting sidetracked. Moral of the story, there's horses. Joe has to find one, and he has to steal it so he can earn the title of war chief. So fast forward a couple months, Joe gets sent out on a mission, being a scout, to scout ahead for his entire unit. So while he's out there by himself, he's looking through his binoculars, and holy shit, it's a German SS officer on horseback. So Joe, using what his grandfather taught him when he was a child, tracks and stalks this guy for miles and miles, and he ends up leading him all the way back to this farmhouse up on a little hill, and there's an entire SS platoon in there, 30, 40 guys, and there's 50 horses in the corral outside. So Joe makes his way back to his unit, grabs his commanding officer, is like, hey, I found an entire SS platoon, let's go get them. So they move out an entire company at dusk, and they surround this farmhouse, and they're gonna wait there overnight with the house completely surrounded, and they are gonna attack at dawn, first thing in the morning. Fast forward, it's an hour before dawn. The Americans have the farmhouse completely surrounded with...
Are you sleeping that night?
What?
You think you're sleeping that night before the attack?
Bro, I can't even sleep before a flight. Like, I get anxiety before I fly the next day.
I know.
There's no way. Like, I just... And back then, there ain't, like, cats popping.
But there's always that, like, that one or two dudes that's just, like, snoring, like, shut the fuck up.
On some, like, other life shit, I'm happily married, you guys. But if I'm just being real with you...
Bro, how do you go... I got to see how this finishes off, because I don't...
I'm just saying,
the start of it...
If I had to go into some shit like that the night before I'm banging some big titty biddy, that's what I'm on. Straight up.
I'm fairly certain
and then just falling asleep, like getting that little good sleep and waking up like...
I don't think that's how war works, bro. I don't think you can...
I mean, yo.
I don't think that's how it works.
Bro, you know, like, a lot of the... Okay, let's just put it this way. I said that because in Germany, they're the kings of the red light district.
Of the milkmaids?
Like that. Yeah, exactly. Why not go get a little milk before the battle?
I just don't think that's the way it works.
It
I don't
probably
think
wasn't. You probably had to go to war and win the spoils.
Yes.
But I'm just saying that you asked me how I would get some
You would
sleep.
go AWOL.
I would not sleep. I wouldn't get sleep. That's all I'm saying.
You're a dog, bro.
Man,
I'm
saying in a parallel life, and you're young, you ain't married, you know what I'm saying? You in these streets.
I don't think that's how it works. I don't think that there's just like milkmaids hanging around the corner like, hey, boys.
I'm willing to bet
you got to paddle in the morning.
I'm just saying. There's probably a little bit of fire out there, I bet you.
Their guns pointed in at the ready. The Germans have been inside the house all night, pre-gaming for the dirt nap they're about to take. And Joe decides to go over to his commanding officer and is like, hey, hear me out. We're here to take out the Nazis. The horses aren't Nazis. The horses are horses. At which point, the commanding officer's like, of course, of course. So he gives Joe permission to go out and try to steal these horses 5 minutes before they launch their attack. It's now dusk, minutes before the sun's about to poke up over the horizon, and Joe sets off by himself with nothing but a Colt 1911 pistol and a rope. He sneaks all the way up to the farmhouse. He sneaks past the guy that's supposed to be on lookout, makes his way over to the corral, opens the gate, makes his way into the barn, opens the barn doors up, gets inside, opens up all the doors on all the stalls for the horses, makes sure not a single horse is tied down, and he finds what he describes to be the most beautiful horse he's ever seen, as he ties a double half-hitch Indian-style bridle, and he hops on that horse bareback. Now, he only needs to steal one horse, but he's gonna steal all 50. Why? Because it's more XP. So Joe hops up on the horse and starts a stampede with the other 49 horses out of the barn, into the corral, out of the corral, and into the field. The Germans, hearing the commotion, run out with their weapons drawn and begin firing at Joe. The Americans start returning fire with their machine guns and their mortars, and it is now just Joe riding through this open field, bareback on a horse, surrounded by 49 other horses. He's just part of the stampede. He starts singing a traditional Crow war song, as there's nothing but machine machine gun fires and mortars going off in the background behind him as the sun finally peeks up over the horizon and covers the field in front of him with rays of light. He has now just completed the fourth and final task to become the last war chief 50 times over in a matter of minutes. And now that we've finally gotten to the point in the story,
I mean, it's crazy to think that there's dudes out there just in the middle of war just doing side quests. Just like, this isn't crazy enough. I got to go touch an enemy. I got to go steal a horse. Just performing side quests, like literally to gain XP, like you said.
You know what's wild, too, is I just think about, this is directed at the last war chief, Joe Medicine Crow. I don't know what movie or documentary I was watching, but it was either some huge leader in Europe or maybe Asia, and they were just totally obsessed with the concept of the Indian warrior from America because they were just so different, but they were still had that warrior like samurai spirit, but it was just such a different culture, and they started hearing these stories of this this warrior from from our continent, and they were just like, what is this? Like, they paint their face, they do this, like they were just like, and I forget what the hell I watched, but I just remembered other cultures being in awe.
It is interesting because that's what we do, like, broadly across the entire planet. Like, I was obsessed with the samurai, but then, like you're saying, all these different countries all across the world are obsessed with the West and that area and the Indians and their lifestyle. So there's always this like romantic like feeling towards like different cultures in different parts of the world.
And again, it's the love of that warrior, that brute, because we know it's just like in us. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you just know. Anyways, all right.
Story where I've told you how he performed the 4 tasks. Can we finally take a moment to appreciate how utterly ridiculous these 4 tasks are? I mean, sure, the first one, lead a war party successfully. That sounds like something you should be able to do as a war chief. However, the other 3 are just straight dunking on the enemy. Like, the amount of disrespect in those 3 tasks is palpable. I mean, let's recap. If you want to be a war chief, you got to roll up on the enemy, touch them with your coup stick, then after you do that, you got to grab his weapon, throw it over there, and then you steal his horse and bounce. I mean, strategically transfer his horse to your stable. If that's not straight gangster shit, I don't know what is. And if you don't believe me, let's just hear what Joe Medicine Crow himself had to say about this.
Me, I'm a famous horse thief.
Like it or not, that man was a straight grunt and a badass one at that. Sorry, I'm getting sidetracked again. So, Joe and his unit ended up getting diverted over to Poland because war in the European theaters finally starting to come to a close, and as a final act of bravery, him and his commanding officer would end up driving a jeep through the front gate of a concentration camp, leading all of their men in to free everyone there. Shortly after that, Germany surrenders. Joe ends up returning to the United States. He's given a Bronze Star for being the first man to penetrate through the Siegfried Line, as well as the French Chevalier, which, if you don't know, is where you're knighted by France. So yeah, Joe is now officially...
There you go, bruh. There you go. Maybe not the, German milkmaids, but, I'm pretty sure that if you are a knighted chevalier, that you're getting a little bit welcome nookie, from the locals.
Getting something from a French girl on the first date.
Yeah. I've heard stories about French, culture and, French women. So
Sir War Chief Joseph Medicine Crow. He then separates from the military, returns home to the reservation of Montana, where he goes before his council of elders that includes his grandfather, the original War Chief Medicine Crow, tells him everything that happened while he was away, and they officially award him the title of War Chief. From there, he's unable to go back to school to finish his doctorate degree because he is given the position of official tribe historian by the Crow people. However, he would receive an honorary doctorate degree in 1999 for his work in anthropology, officially making him Dr. Sir War Chief Joseph Medicine Crow. This man has more titles than a used car dealership, okay? He would then go on to live happily ever after before passing away April 3rd, 2016 at the age of 102, taking with him the title of the last war chief. And I know what you're thinking, because I thought the same thing. Why has he got to be the last war chief? What if another young man manages to pull off all 4 feats? Well, it's probably not going to happen, at least not anytime soon, because it's proving to be increasingly harder to A, commit a counting coup in the age of machine guns, and B, find a horse on a modern battlefield. You see, one other man came extremely close to achieving the title of war chief, and it was actually Joe Medicine Crow's nephew, Carson walks over ice. In an attempt to follow in his uncle's footsteps, he became a Green Beret during Vietnam, where he committed a counting coup, disarmed an enemy, and led a successful war party. He then proceeded to carry with him on every mission a rope, just in case he could find a horse, but he never did. But then one day, while
That's a whole nother story in itself.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't know about a horse, but does an ox count? I mean, I feel like, you know, if you could steal the enemies like ox in Vietnam, that should be like, you know,
No.
slide it in.
That's
you know what I mean?
patrolling the Ho Chi Minh Trail, he could hear rustling in the jungle off to the side. Something was breaking branches, and as he went in to investigate, it was a VC guiding 2 elephants that were tied together, using them as pack animals to carry guns and explosives. He dispatched the enemy combatant and stole both of the elephants. Upon returning home and confessing his war deeds to the Council of Elders, they would inform him that he would not be granted the title of war chief because, as it turns out, elephants aren't horses. So in conclusion, the world is going to...
Nah, dog, that's some bullshit.
Nah, man, they sticking to the rules, man. You see when you don't stick to the program, what happens? Look at America, man.
No, I feel like
You
they
know what I'm
robbed
saying?
him.
I
Elephants?
mean-
Two elephants?
Flag
Come
on
on,
the play,
man.
Flag on the play.
No.
Let it rip.
continue to have knights and sirs and ma'ams and lords and ladies and doctors and college graduates and anthropologists and grunts and brave warriors, but the world very well may never have another war chief ever again. But when we did, his name was Joseph Medicine Crow, the last war chief. Thanks for watching. Best way to support the channel is like, comment, subscribe. Go check out thefatelectrician.com. Quack bang out.
Let it play. Sometimes he'll have stuff at the very end. I don't think there is because it's so short. But I ain't gonna lie, man. That story's insane. Like, I just feel like I always say this because I react to him on my other channel too. But it's just like the perfect, like, what I envision sitting at the campfire and someone just telling the most perfect story, and you just go to bed in awe, like, damn. And it also inspires you to be a better person, a human. Like, you know, this brother lived a long life, man. 102 is crazy, especially with all the risk he took.
That is crazy.
That's just that's what I want.
You say that.
Oh, Lord have mercy. Well, I mean, I want to live to 100
Yeah.
plus. They're
Do
saying
you?
they're yeah, absolutely. Since I was a child, I started praying.
That's so funny, bro. Like, that is
because I was so scared of the hellfire.
that is so
Started praying
funny
when I
because
was
like
probably
that
2 or 3.
that just is not something that I've thought about. Like, you know.
The specific number was 99. So now I'm nervous that I'm only going to make it to 99 because I kind of want to get past that hundo. But when I was very young, probably 2 or 3, I'd always...
You prayed on it, and now you locked yourself in. You're like, dang it, come on, man. With all this technology, let's do 130. And you're like, nope, it's going to be 99 because I prayed for it, and I should have aimed higher. See, that's what happens, bro. You gotta set your sights higher. You were aiming low at 99. You should have said, like, 130. Dear Lord, let me be as old as Methuselah when I die.
What do you know when you're 3 years old? I don't know how old I was. I was super young, though. Really young. Anyways.
That's crazy.
Fire, man. Good. The fat electrician does it again.
Yeah, hopefully y'all enjoyed this, and if you do and you keep watching, we'll keep on doing them. So, yeah, these are fun
Like,
reactions
share,
from me.
comment, subscribe. We'll holla.